Hey guys, it's the Unsmooth Criminal, and I'm here with a what if, and this is a what if that I'm redoing. So, yeah, it's. I have a question before we start, and this is a more philosophical question than an actual literal question that you guys need to answer. What is happiness to you? Sorry, let me rephrase this. What brings you so much happiness that it lasts for more than a day? Also known as joy to some people. I personally think my YouTube channel brings me happiness, and it does for me. It brings me enough happiness that I want to keep doing it. So that's why I make these videos for you guys. Then there's some people who think shooting guns or doing violent things in a controlled area is fun and brings them happiness, and that's good for them. And there's some that have something screwed up, and I'm not going to put anybody in this label, but they have something screwed up mentally or physically that stops them from feeling joy or the long-term happiness from things, and they seek the pleasure of certain items. Like alcohol brings people relief from daily concerns or daily problems. And I'm not saying go out and buy a big bottle of alcohol. Don't do that. Don't. Nor am I saying, oh, go drink and drive. Don't do that. No. Don't do any controlled substance and then go and operate a vehicle. Never do that. And I'm not advocating for drugs at all, whatsoever in this video. YouTube, I know you're listening. I'm not advocating for drugs. There's some people who do the illegal drugs to have even more of a relief and have that high that they want. But then there are these people who are so hooked on that high and keep wanting that high that they do whatever they want to or do whatever they need to get that high again. And this high normally comes with a really big low. And if you're suffering with drugs and alcohol, please seek help. But this is going to be a what if that has a mention of drugs and alcohol in it. And I do not advocate for any kind of drug, any kind of alcohol. I just need to put that out there like 5 million times. I do not advocate for any kind of drug or alcohol for any kind of human being. But if it's prescribed to you by your doctor, I have nothing to say for it. If it's prescribed, use it. But if it's not, then I suggest you stay away from it as far away as you can from it as long as possible. And let's get into it. We go to a so brightly lit room that if you walk in, you have to shut your eyes, pretty much, to adjust to the very bright lights. And there's a girl sitting in the middle of the room. And this little flap on the door opens slightly, and this rod pushes a platter in. And this platter has a bowl of red liquid in it. And she smells this bowl being pushed into the cell, and before anybody knows it, the bowl's empty. And she has a little trickle of red liquid down her chin, and she immediately licks it up and sits back down in her chair. And she's just sitting there. And someone walks in and says she's been fed, and she eats like this. Since she's been fed, she's more docile. And this is a specific type of blood that doesn't have very big of an effect on her, but still has an effect on her to make her more docile. So he walks in and says, "Are you ready to talk now? I'm here to help." And she responds back, "I don't need help. I'm perfectly fine. Why do you keep me trapped in here?" And he goes, because if we let you go, you'll hurt more people. And she goes, I don't want to hurt them, but I need to hurt them. And he goes, we understand, and we want to help you stop this hunger that you have and can't control. And she goes, I want to hurt you for more, but I don't get any more tomorrow if I do. And he goes, yes. And we've told you that. We've also shown you that if you hurt the people that walk in this room that have this collar on them, then you don't get any tomorrow. And she goes, yes, I know, but I really want more. And he goes, I understand. Now can we go over from the beginning? And she goes, sure. And she starts by saying, it was a normal day at school. And we go with a flashback of 6 years. She's had a mutation quirk her entire life. She has ears, she has a tail, and everybody laughs at her, pokes fun at her, and bullies her all day. And she does have fangs because she's part cat, but those fangs have a side effect. One of the students, her best friend in the entire world, her basically cousin, because her mother introduced them, got a cut. This was a day after her 4th birthday, and her quirk is supposed to start manifesting now. And her cousin, basically, Katsuki Bakugo, got a cut on her finger. She's a tiny cut, and she started losing blood very, very slowly. And yes, it's going to be Izumi Midoriya, and Inko Midoriya is going to be her mother. Inko has the normal little small telekinesis quirk, but her husband is some guy that she had a one-night stand with at some random bar one day, and she doesn't know who he is. So she can't go and see what his quirk is, so Izumi doesn't know what her full quirk is. She just knows she has a mutation quirk. And Inko knows the cat side is from her family because her grandmother had a mutation quirk of a cat. So she doesn't know where the fangs came from because her grandmother didn't have fangs. So Katsuki walks over by Izumi and is holding her thumb and squeezing it, letting blood come out so it can clot. And Izumi smells the blood and doesn't know why, but she wants to jump on Katsuki and start drinking. She doesn't know what to drink. She has the urge to do this. And she's like, I'm just going to put it to the back of my mind and focus on not doing it. So she does, and she goes home that day, and she tells her mom what she felt. And Inko's like, okay, I'm going to take you to quirk counseling and the quirk doctor tomorrow and see if anything awakened while you're at school. And she goes, okay. So the very next day, it was an emergency quirk doctor call. They take them to not the canon quirk doctor, a random quirk doctor that has the ability to see the abilities of the quirk, but not be able to see the quirk's name. And he calls in another doctor that had the ability to see the name of the quirk, and they normally stay together. And the doctor who can see the name is like, yeah, no, don't look at hers. Don't. And he's like, what do you mean? And he goes, if you do, you're probably going to go insane. And he goes, what do you mean? And the second doctor that came in later is like, yeah, if you look at hers, we're both going to be dead. And he goes, why? And he goes, well, all we can do is tell her mother what the quirk is and tell her not to give or not to bleed anywhere near her. And the first doctor's like, okay, we'll do that, but I would like to still see what the child's abilities are, and I will take the risk if needed. And he goes, you can't. You can't take the risk because I know I can't see the abilities, but I know the abilities of this certain creature that she's basically, her quirk's modeled after, basically. And I know that the way your quirk activates, her new main quirk will activate, and you'll definitely be hurt in the process. And he goes, okay, we'll tell her Miss Midoriya, and we'll give her advice to make sure nothing happens. So they tell her to never look in her daughter's eyes directly and never bleed near her daughter. And if her daughter starts bleeding, let her be alone in a room for more than 24 hours. No food, no water, no nothing. And she asks why, and the doctor who saw the name tells Inko the name, and Inko is absolutely horrified of her own daughter. Now, so we skip 2 years. Izumi has never been back to school. She's still being treated like a She's been treated like a monster. Every time Katsuki and Mitsuki come over, Inko lies about where Izumi is. And they go on. Mitsuki's starting to get very Mitsuki's starting to think that Inko's very suspicious at this point because she hasn't seen Izumi in over 2 years. Every 3 months, Inko goes down to see if her daughter's dead yet. And she hasn't died. So, she just goes over to the what looks like mummified corpse and just looks at it and doesn't see any life in it. But she knows that there's something wrong with it. That if she does anything to it, it's going to attack her. And it's just this natural instinct to walk away from it and don't touch it. By this time, her clothes have been completely disintegrated via time. So she has no clothes on. She looks almost like a mummy. There's just a little bit of flesh left on the bone. And at this point, Izumi is in a death-like state. Her heart has literally stopped, but her brain is barely holding on. Just barely. And her quirk is not centered in her brain. Not this one. This is one of the very rare mutations that is centered around her entire body. At least one body part is still active and has blood coursing through it. She can regenerate completely. So, how many minutes am I in? I feel like I've been in here for like 20. 10 minutes. That's just setting up her abilities, or a little bit of her abilities so far. So we go to when Mitsuki finally smells something raunchy at the door of Inko's apartment. Because she's bought out an apartment complex, and she put Izumi down in the apartment complex, like five apartments, and took everything out of it to where there's pretty much nothing there besides water that's turned off and electricity that's turned off. So she can walk up to the power socket and plug something in, but nothing happens to it. So it's literally a vacant apartment. And she's just lying there in a corner against the wall. She's just sitting there. And if anybody's seen Van Helsing Ultimate, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about by lying there against the wall, not moving, looking like a dead corpse. Alucard. And this man wanted to see if there was any valuables in this apartment that has been walked into every 3 months, because he's been staking out this apartment complex. Because every apartment gets in and out traffic except for this one. Only one person goes in once a month or once every 3 months. And he's wondering if this is where all the money's stored. So he's breaking into this apartment building and he cuts himself. And he nicks himself with his tools to pick the lock picks. And he starts sucking on the thumb to, yes, it's a thumb, to stop the bleeding. And one of Izumi's abilities activate. The bleeding doesn't completely slow down, but it slows down, or doesn't completely stop, but it slows down a lot. So, if you have, what is it? A rare genetic disease that doesn't allow your blood to clot very easily. I forget the name of it. But if you have that, then it would almost stop immediately, but it would just slowly drip. And he's still sucking on it, wondering why it's not stopping. And he looks at it and it's slowly growing in size. And he finally gets in and he looks in and there's nothing there. So he looks around to see if there's a safe. Because he's like, I got in here, I hurt myself, might as well look. And he sees the dead body, he's like, what's next? It starts moving. And he turns around and he hears creaking, crackling. Like, bone breaking kind of crackling. And he turns back and the body's gone. And he's like, what the hell's going on? And he continues looking around and he keeps hearing this crackling, like someone's spine's snapping into place. Someone's cracking their knuckles. And he keeps hearing it from all around him. And he keeps hearing it over and over, to his right, to his left, in front of him, behind him. And he looks behind him when he last heard it. And then he's like, nothing's there. It's just my nerves. And he turns around and he sees the corpse. And his screams are silenced when something bites his neck. It bit through his jugular and the other artery. I forget the other artery's name. It bit through both arteries at the same exact time. And it starts sucking all the blood out of him. And slowly, very, very slowly, but the color returns to her skin. Her muscle goes back. And she looks healthy again. And the guy's just there, dead, on the floor from blood loss. And he has 4 puncture wounds. 2 on the left side of his neck and 2 on the right side of his neck. On both arteries. And he's just lying there, dead. And she walks out. And she walks over to her mother's apartment after slaughtering the rest of the apartments, drinking all the blood, because she is hungry. And her eyes are glazed over, just going right off of instinct. And when her mother heard a knock at the door, She gladly ran over and opened it and saw nobody there. And she stepped out thinking, oh, someone's probably wanting my help somewhere else. So she stepped out looking where it is, and it's currently really dark at night. The moon's directly up in the sky. It's roughly a little bit after midnight. And her head gets torn right off of her body. And all you can hear in this area is giggling. And the sound of somebody drinking something. And it's gruesome slaughter for every apartment in this building. And she walks down the street like a few blocks and passes out. She has blood down her face. She has no clothes on. She has no weapon, so just think of the picture without a weapon. And some cop, yes, it's a cop, was going home from his late night patrol and saw her on the ground. And he's like, oh crap, what happened to her? So he runs over thinking, oh crap, I need an ambulance. And he calls up an ambulance. I need an ambulance at such and such street because it looks like a little girl may be hurt. There's a lot of blood. It's all he can see. And he says this, and he also says that there may also be an unstable quirk, so call Aizawa or Eraserhead. And so they call Eraserhead, and Eraserhead gets there and sees the paramedics slaughtered and all their blood is drained, and the cop slaughtered with all of his blood drained and his gun out. And he's like, okay, what's going on here? And he looks around and he doesn't see anything. And then he sees that both sides of their neck have been pierced with 2 different puncture marks on the major arteries for both of the paramedics and the cop. The next morning, Aizawa's walking back into UA because he is a teacher and it's the first day of UA. And he sees his class and he's like, yeah, you're all expelled, So he walks up to Nezu and goes, yeah, my class was complete idiots. There was an incident with a cop and 2 paramedics. I'm going to go look into that. Call me if you need anything. And Nezu goes, I will. And Aizawa walks out again. And Aizawa is walking around with his civilian clothes on. And he has a scarf on, too, because he never leaves home without a scarf. And he has his goggles hidden underneath his scarf. But he's wearing his civilian clothes. Which is literally just his hero outfit. It's literally just his hero outfit. So he's walking around and he hears a scream. And he runs over and he sees that it's a girl screaming because they see a severed head on the ground. And he sees this apartment building and he recognizes that just down the street that there was a few blocks down, there was a killing of a cop and 2 paramedics. So he looks around and he sees that all the doors are unlocked. Everybody was killed in the exact same way, except for one, the exact same way that the paramedics and police officer were. And he's like, what the hell's going on? We go back to Izumi, and she's trying to stay as far away from windows as possible. And she doesn't get hurt by the light, but she just doesn't like the light. It's irritating to her. So she walks over to the window and cuts her finger. And she slowly moves the limited amount of blood she has in her body, because her body can hold a lot more blood than a normal body. And she has it basically blot out the sun. And she can see perfectly fine in the dark. And she has thermal vision. But she can see perfectly fine. And so she's like, I'm still hungry. And she hears somebody gallivanting outside the building. Just skipping outside the building. And she's currently 6 still. I'm about to do a huge time leap. She's 6 and she hears the skipping. So she coerces the person into the building, and it is Himiko Toga. And if anybody's seen the stream that I had earlier today, you'll know exactly what Himiko Toga is in this story. And if you guys haven't seen the stream and you guess ship, no comment. So Himiko runs in, and she has her killer instinct because she's already killed her father. She's killed her father from being the abusive jerk he is. So she's embraced the side of killing. And she still has the exact same ability of drink someone's blood a little and you get their shape for a little bit. She has the exact same one of those abilities. So, oh crap, I stopped walking and I started to yawn. And she's like, okay, what's going on here? And she walks in and she smells blood, because she does have increased senses. So she walks over to where the smell is coming from and sniffs the basically window. And she's like, why is the window covered in blood? And all of a sudden she hears something run behind her. And she turns around quickly because she's a little freaked out now. And she's like, okay, this is funny, but you can come out now, whoever you are. And Izumi, thinking many different things at once, appears behind her and bites Himiko's neck. Once she got a single drop of Himiko's blood, her bite loosened. It went from an alligator's bite strength to a kitten's bite strength. And she just kept drinking as much as she could until she had her fill. And Himiko, feeling the slight pleasure from getting bitten, allowed this. So, we skip to later that day, and Izumi gets over her high from the specific blood from Himiko, and Izumi looks at Himiko, who has been protecting her all day. Himiko has not left, because Himiko saw what the blood did to her and was like, ooh, friend. So Himiko's like, yeah, I like you. You like blood too. Because Himiko still has her blood fanatic personality. So when Izumi wakes up from her days of drinking the blood, she's like, what happened? And she looks at where Himiko is and sees that Himiko is clinging to Izumi. Himiko is clinging to her like there's no tomorrow. And Himiko starts saying stuff in her sleep, like, stop hitting me, please don't hurt me. And Izumi, still having somewhat of a heroic desire, hugs Himiko and says that everything will be okay. Himiko wakes up and sees that Himiko and Izumi are both hugging and very close. Himiko, being bi, thinks perverted thoughts. Yes, Himiko is still what is it? 6 in this. So we skip 2 years, and Himiko and Izumi have both been basically known as the vampires on the loose. And Himiko every once in a while gives Izumi a taste of her blood, because that's the only thing that can calm Izumi down from a massive high, or massive bloodlust episode. Is a massive high. So they've been going around town and only attacking villains and heroes that they've seen do awful deeds. Like, there's this one random dude called Native. He survived their attack, but just barely, because another hero showed up, and they knew he was a good hero, because it was friggin' Aizawa. Duh. So they ran away. They easily ran away from Aizawa, because Izumi's quirk is always active. You can't deactivate it. And they've been doing this for 2 to 3 years. So they're 8 to 9. Izumi just turned 9. Himiko is turning 9 the next day. So they're basically born 1 day apart. Well, technically 24 hours apart. But, or not 24 hours. 36 hours, but who's counting? So Izumi, he celebrated Himiko's birthday, and Himiko celebrated Izumi's birthday. And Izumi only knows her birthday because of the 4 years that she was actually taken care of by her mother. And they got along because they had similar stories of people calling them monsters. And, well, Izumi, they literally starved her, and Himiko, they beat her half to death. So Izumi and Himiko are getting along really well, and it's now both their 9th birthdays. They go out for a snack. Well, Izumi for a snack, and Himiko for her addiction to blood. And they go outside, and right when they step outside the warehouse door, they get stopped by somebody. And they don't want to act violent towards him, because they know that he's a good guy. And Himiko still wants to be a hero. And Izumi just follows Himiko, because Himiko is the only thing that can calm her down. And Izumi just doesn't want to go on rampages. So he walks up to them and says, hey, little ones, I have a question for you. And they go, sure, what is it? And he goes, well, it's a question about where do you live? And they go, oh, we're orphans. We live on the street. And he goes, oh, really? I'll gladly adopt you then. And they go, no, thanks. We prefer the street. And he goes, why? And they go, well, the street's the only thing that can provide for them. And they're trying to swing him around to get away from him. Or just distract him so they can get away. And he goes, okay, well, I'd like to ask you guys a few questions then. They go, sure, what is it? And he goes, well, is your name? And he points at Toga. Himiko Toga. And she goes, yeah. And he points at Izumi and says, here's Izumi Midoriya. And she goes, yeah. And he goes, well, by the power vested in me, and yes, I'm doing that. The power vested in me by Japan, I now hereby arrest you two for the murders of multiple people in countless areas, and I am here to take you in. And Izumi clings to Himiko, and Himiko clings to Izumi, and they say, okay, but there's only one rule for detaining us. And he goes, yes, what is it? And they go, we must be put in the same cell, or Himiko starts saying things that Izumi will do, and Izumi starts being like, yeah, I'll go berserk. And he goes, okay. So he takes them into the police station and says, I need these people in a cell, or these two in a cell. That one can break out at any time, but she'll always stay with her, so if you can keep her in a cell, you're fine. And they go, why? And he goes, do it, or I can get this entire police station fired. Because I know what he does. And he lists all the things that all these people do, and he says, and also, I got something in my chest that is linked to my heart, that if my heart stops, or I am put in any kind of cell, which blocks radio signals, it sends a email out to every police station. And they get pissed off because he's been doing this countless times to bring in villains that they've been just ignoring because they just don't care. So they're like, fine. They take them into a certain cell, and this cell is specifically designed for strength quirks. And he's like, yeah, that won't work. But sure. So he goes, and one of the officers like, let's have some fun with them since we're going to have to hold them for a while. And the rest of them start joining him, and one step too close to Toga, and Izumi went berserk. But since Izumi can still be affected by sleeping poison which kills her for a little bit but brings her back, but she is resurrected, so she's technically not immune to poisons, but she's still immune to poisons. She is incapacitated, and Himiko has been perfecting her quirk to where she could start using other people's quirks at a lower voltage, basically. And she always has a little vial of Izumi's blood and a tooth she has, a fake tooth that Izumi learned how to install. And Izumi got shot by a dart from one of the officers, and they started like, yeah, they're both gotta die. And Toga used her tongue and teeth to loosen the tooth and bite down on the capsule, which is a way of suicide for spies. That it would release cyanide, but it releases a little bit of blood. And Toga takes on the shape of Izumi. And she starts ripping them to shreds again. They start freaking out, like, what's going on? The chief, who's not corrupt, but can't do anything about all the corrupt cops in his precinct because they're all corrupt, except for him, immediately calls Aizawa, being like, yeah, they tried to do stuff with them, and, well, they're all dead now. And Aizawa comes running back with All Might and Endeavor by his side. And he goes, okay. And he walks up to the jail cell and goes, okay, so what happened? And Izumi's currently, Toga's currently cuddling with Izumi, because Izumi's still passed out on the ground. And Toga says that they wanted to do stuff to me, and Izumi protected me. And he goes, okay, Um, that. And he points at the dart gun and she goes, I don't know. They just shot her and she collapsed. And he goes, maybe sleeping drugs? And she goes, maybe, or just normal poison. And he goes, what do you mean normal poison? And she goes, well, poisons don't really work on Izumi. They just keep her incapacitated for a little bit. And he goes, okay, how do you know this? And she goes, well, I needed to find ways to calm her down if she went on a rampage. So the only successful way is to let her bite me. And she shows the arm with all the bite marks that Izumi has put in her arm. And he goes, okay then. Any other way to keep her from going berserk? And she goes, yeah. But I promise never to deploy this method, starving her to the point where she can't hurt anything. And he goes, what do you mean she can't hurt anything? Well, and she explains what happened to Izumi when Izumi was little, with the 2 years of being stuck in one room or one apartment building and not being able to eat, not knowing what you are until it's too late and you've already killed somebody by basically biting their head off. And she explains what Izumi went through, and Izumi's starting to wake up and sees Aizawa and thinks that he's about to do something to Himiko, and Himiko immediately puts her hand in Izumi's mouth, and Izumi bites down, thinking, just thinking, closed mouth, ready for fight. When Himiko gets bitten, she has a little bit of pleasure because, well, she likes being bitten in this one. And Izumi immediately calms down and acts like has a 2.0 blood alcohol level. And he sees this and goes, okay then. I see why you said to keep her in the same cell as you. And she goes, yeah. And Izumi's like, what are they doing? And she's acting all woozy, and she is all woozy. And he goes, what makes you different than other people? And she goes, well, multiple people have had this effect on her. It's just, I'm the only one that she hasn't killed yet. I don't know why, but I'm the only one that she hasn't killed. So, and Aizawa goes, okay, I'm going to transfer both of you to a secure holding facility for now until I can get a correct room for you guys. And they go, what do you mean room? And he goes, well, you'll see when it's done. So they get moved to an insane asylum, and Izumi's left in a room for 24 hours, and then she gets a small bowl of blood every 24 hours, saying if she doesn't do anything to the people who come in and talk to her, then she gets more. And we go back to the shrink that's currently in the room, and this shrink is not anybody too special, but it's still someone special. It's Bakugo's biological aunt. And I'm going to give Bakugo a biological aunt. Mitsuki's sister. And Bakugo is still wondering where Izumi is, because she hasn't seen her since she was 4. So, we go to a few days later, and Bakugo's aunt calls Mitsuki, and Mitsuki answers and asks what she wants, and she goes, can I come over and talk to you about somebody that I have to take care of? And she goes, sure, but if you spill too much information, you're gonna get fired. And she goes, yeah, I know. I also know that you can keep quiet if I accidentally. And she goes, yeah, true. Come on over. And so she comes over and she greets Bakugo, and Bakugo's like, hi. She Bakugo runs back to her room, and Bakugo's a little nicer in this one, so she doesn't call Mitsuki old hag all the time. She just calls her old hag whenever she's embarrassed or she's angry. Otherwise, she calls her mom. And she goes, okay, Bakugo, you can't be in the room for this. I need to talk to your mother alone. And Bakugo, hearing this, goes, okay, I'll go be in my room. And Mitsuki goes, okay, what is it? And she goes, well, I finally got a patient to open up with her story, and I want your opinion on this story. And she goes, okay. And so she says the exact story that, or with a few minor details of not saying the hero's name, just saying pro hero and the mother and daughter, and saying her best friend. So she's leaving off a lot of details, but Mitsuki, hearing this, has a flashback to when they learn that Inko died. And Mitsuki goes, quick question. And she goes, sure, what is it? And Mitsuki goes, is the child's name Izumi Midoriya? And she goes, I can't answer that question. She goes, God damn it, answer the question. If yes, say yes. If no, just say no. And she goes, yeah. And Mitsuki's like, what? And she goes, well, I was going to tell you the name earlier, but I was told that I couldn't release any names of patients when I signed the job, so I couldn't tell you. And she goes, well, I understand that, but I've been looking for her because she's been missing for 6 years. And she goes, she hasn't been missing for 6 years. She's been on the run for the last 4. And Mitsuki's like, I know. But I don't know why. I would like to know. So can I visit her sometime? And she goes, no, you're not allowed to visit. She's not allowed to have any visitors except the pro hero that found her. And the only one who can calm her down if she goes on a rampage. And Mitsuki goes, what do you mean? And she goes, well, we have one patient in here that's at low security risk. A very, very low security risk. The only thing that we require to give her is an ounce of blood a month. And she goes, okay, and why? And she goes, well, this person plays with the blood, but we're required to give a pint of blood a day to Izumi. And she's now using Izumi's name, and she goes, why? And she says Izumi's quirk. I'm not saying the quirk yet. That is for somebody else. That is for me later to say. And I wanted to do I know you probably were like, oh, you're copying not Voidspawn, Ravenclaw, because he just did a Vampire What If. No, I did a Vampire What If before Ravenclaw. Well, semi before Ravenclaw, because he did one before me. I did a Vampire one before Ravenclaw. I just wanted to redo it, and I finally got a good idea for redoing it. That's why. So, back on topic. So, we go another month later, and Izumi gets the daily visit from the shrink, and she walks in with a phone, and she goes, I have somebody that you need to call and say hi to. You probably haven't talked to them in a really long time, and they really want to talk to you. And she goes, if it's my mother, I don't want to talk to her. And she goes, it's not your mother. I can guarantee that it's not your mother. And she goes, how? And she goes, that jerk put me in a freaking room and locked me there for multiple months. months. I don't even know how long I was in there. And she goes, well, it's not your mother. It's someone that you're pretty fond of. And she pulls up the phone and dials the number. And she's like, okay, Mitsuki. And Izumi, hearing Mitsuki, starts to tear up and goes, no, I don't want to talk to her. And she goes, okay, fine. I'm sorry, but she doesn't want to talk. And Mitsuki goes, okay, I understand. Tell her that I've been looking for her. And she goes, I will. And she turns back to Izumi, who's currently burying her head in her hands because she remembers Bakugo perfectly fine. And she's like, oh God, what have I done? Again. When she's with Himiko, she doesn't have any regrets because she knows that Himiko will stop her from going too far. But when she's alone, she has all regrets because she remembers everything she's done and what she doesn't want to do again. So she starts crying and she starts screaming. And another part of her quirk starts activating. And I'm giving this to her as an original ability. I don't know if any vampires before have had this, so I'm hoping that they haven't. It's the Cry of the Banshee. I'm giving her this as a vampire ability. And all of a sudden, the shrink's ears start to bleed, and she's losing hearing very quickly. So she runs over to the door and snaps the sound barrier, which completely encases her in a glass tube that completely knocks out all sound around her. And the tube starts to vibrate. And she's like, oh crap, it's going to shatter. So she starts hitting the code red. The containment's about to break. So they all get ready for containment about to breach. A containment breach from her. And then the shrink walks out saying, clear everybody from this wing. We need to leave now. And they all look at her and they ask why. And she goes, I can't hear you. And she's yelling at this point because she can't hear anything except for her own voice when she's yelling. And they're like, oh, crap. So they clear all the non-important, the they clear everybody that is non-vital for people to be there. And they gave the people who are the people who are vital, well, that have to stay there at 24/7 a day, headphones to wear so they don't have any of the screaming going to the ear and they lose hearing. So everybody gets headphones except for Toga, who hears the crying and runs as fast as possible and is too far into the screaming to actually have headphones be effective. And she doesn't hear any of the screaming. She hears whimpering. She hears whimpering from a little kitten, form of whimpering from a kitten that's hurt and is asking for help. And she runs in and she starts calming down Izumi, and Izumi finally gets something that she hasn't had in a while. AB negative blood. Yes, I'm making that. I think that's the rarest blood type possible. So we go to We go to a month later, when Aizawa shows back up and asks why everybody who was closest to her is not here today, and they all say that all their hearing has been blown out and that they need to be hospitalized for a little bit. And he asks why, and they say subject 34, and he goes, who? And they go, subject 34, the vampire that you brought in. And he goes, I didn't bring in a subject. I brought in a little girl who needed to be watched because she's mentally disturbed and broken. And they go, right, Izumi Midoriya. And he goes, thank you. What happened? And he goes, well, we finally allowed her to have a little bit of outside contact from one of her old family or old friends, and she refused the contact and started to cry. And they showed the video, and they saw, or Aizawa saw that the sound barrier came down and goes, why was the sound barrier deployed? And he goes, watch. And they keep watching, and all of a sudden, the sound barrier just shatters. Just completely shatters. And he goes, what the hell? And the guy goes, wait, the best part's coming up. And Himiko runs in, and the security camera that's been put in a soundproof box to watch over her has started to shake from the vibrations of her crying. And Himiko, while Izumi has been crying, opens Izumi's mouth and lets her bite down. And she's sobbing at this point. She's been sobbing. And Himiko running in and allowing her to bite down. She started to cry even more, and Himiko, she drank so much of Himiko's blood that Himiko passed out from blood loss. And Aizawa sees this and sees that once Himiko passed out, that Izumi stopped drinking and curled up next to Himiko and just fell asleep. And he goes, okay, what's next? And he goes, well, after she lost consciousness, she changed. And Aizawa looks back at the recording and goes, okay, for how long? And he goes, a split second. You'll see it now. And he said that in a flash of light, and then something stopped. Flash of light. And he goes, okay. What was that? And he goes, we don't know. And everybody who heard the basically banshee cry from her has been hospitalized for ear damage. They can't stand straight from vertigo. And the only one who wasn't affected by the cry was Himiko. And this security guard said all this, and as I was like, what the hell is going on? How long have I been recording? This is getting good. I keep going for a little bit. Oh. So far, I hope you guys are enjoying. And the security guard goes, I'm glad that we had her basically drug on hand. He goes, hey, the girl laying right there, and he points at the screen, laying right there is not a drug. She's the antidote to the very bad mental trauma that she's having. And he points at Izumi. And Izumi's like curled up in a little ball, trying to stay as close as possible to Himiko. And Himiko is rolling around at different just speeds every once in a while, and they're still in the same room. Hasn't been more than 5 hours since, and it was really late at night that the shrink visits Izumi, so yeah. So he sees that Izumi is malnourished. There's very little meat on her bones, if you want to compare it to that. And you can see her rib cage through her. And he goes, "How much blood have you been giving her?" And the guy goes, "We've been giving her the exact same amount since you told us to give her. And apparently it's been working, and she hasn't been awake for the last 5 hours. That's it. She's, every time that we send in the shrink, she has a meal before. Every 24 hours, we send in the shrink." And Aizawa goes, yes, I understand that. But, and he goes, "And lately, the blood that we've been giving her, and we've been giving her all random kinds of blood, have been apparently not satisfying enough to her, and she's been drinking it so fast that we have been actually giving her more than you said." And he goes, "Okay. So, what now?" And he goes, "Well, you can visit her, but she's still asleep, so if you wake her up, she might attack you." And he goes, "Okay, so you've dealt with her while she's asleep." And he goes, "Yeah." And he pulls down his sleeve and he shows his arm and goes, "I don't know why, but she bit me on the arm instead of the neck like everybody else that goes in there." And he goes, "What's your blood type?" And he goes, "I don't know. I haven't had it tested in many years, so I've just completely forgotten it." And he goes, "Well, Himiko Toga's blood type, and this is supposed to be very classified, is AB negative. And the only place that she bites Himiko is the arm. And anybody that has AB negative blood, she has bitten on the arm ever since she's met Himiko. So I think you have AB negative blood." And he goes, "Okay. Good to know. So I've been stationed here till she gets she's basically back awake, and then I'm to report and get reassigned here permanently." And Aizawa goes, okay, well, you're not going to be assigned here for very long, because I'm going to be moving her to UA in 5 years. And he goes, "Okay. Do you want me to start teaching her?" And he goes, "Yes, please, because it apparently looks like she hasn't been taught anything since she was 4. And he goes, "Well, actually, she's been taught a little bit of table manners by Toga. That's it." And he goes, "How's that experiment of her getting normal food?" And he goes, "Well, it looks like she can eat normal food, but normal food is very not very good for her." And he asks why. Okay. And he says, "Well, from what I overheard the doctor saying, that it doesn't have enough nutrition in it. She'd have to eat 5 times as much normal food to get the same amount as 1 pint of nutrition as 1 pint of blood would." And he goes, "Okay. Anything else I should know before I walk in there? Because I'm about to go in there." And he goes, "Well, yeah, she doesn't like fire or silver." And he goes, "What do you mean fire or silver?" And he goes, "Well, one of the doctors had a silver ring on, and it was pure silver, because that's the only metal she doesn't have an allergy to." And he goes, "Okay, what else?" And he goes, "Well, she walked in and she accidentally dipped her ring in the blood. And she immediately walked over and washed her ring off and her hand off because she accidentally forgot to put gloves on before she started touching the blood and the thing. And she put the tray down and fed her like normal, and Izumi refused to touch it. She actually stayed away from the blood that day. And when they finally figured out what was different between this blood and the rest, and then we're like, okay, write it down. We need to keep a close eye on everybody who wears silver. So that person has been placed on watching over Toga instead of Izumi, because that person has a very bad addiction with, or that person's the only person who can actually give them blood, and they have a bad addiction of watching vampire movies. So that's the only person that can actually dish out the blood. And that's the only person who can overwatch us dishing out the blood. And he goes, well, that's a very peculiar, very peculiar predicament. And he goes, yeah. So we have her overwatch the other scientist / doctor here and some other shrinks who dish out the blood to her now, because we don't want that same incident happening, because we almost had a containment breach that day. And he goes, well, good idea. Anything else I should know? And he goes, yeah. She loves explosions. We don't know why, but she just loves explosions. And he goes, I probably tell you why, because explosions are beautiful. They're art. And he goes, okay. But she has a very bad obsession with explosions. She hears a gunshot, and she's like, oh, mini explosion. She hears any kind of compressive blast, she thinks of explosions. And she can hear a lot of them. And he pulls out a cap gun, and he pulls the trigger. And it goes off. And Izumi's ear twitches. And he goes, see? She can hear all of them. And he puts the cap gun away, and he says, we use that for a scare tactic on some of the fragile-minded adults when we need to. We use it for scare tactics to put them back in their containment cells. That's basically what they are. He goes, okay, I understand. Now, I'm gonna walk in there. If there's anything else, tell me now. He goes, I don't think there is. So I will just keep watching over the... And Aizawa finally walks in there and goes, okay. And he sees the chair, and he sits on the chair and goes, okay, I'll wait. A good hour to 2 hours later, Izumi finally wakes up. And she sees Aizawa, and he waves, and she's like, oh, hi, I did something bad, didn't I? And he goes, no. I'm here to give you an offer. And she goes, what is it? And he goes, well, the offer is that you and Toga both get into UA, but you must get caught up in your studies in 5 years, and you're going to be in my class. If you do anything out of line for my rules, you're immediately expelled and put in jail. And she's like, okay. And she clings to Toga, and Toga's starting awake a little, and because Aizawa was a little loud at this point, because he wanted to wake Toga up slightly. And Toga finally opens her eyes and sees Aizawa, and just goes, morning, and snuggles back into Izumi's grasped because they're pretty much the same size. And Izumi does have heterochromacy in this, but she normally has it hidden. One of her eyes is dark blue and the other eye is bright crimson red. So, yeah. So Aizawa finally says, and it's time for you to start learning. And he waves his hand at the camera, and the man with the AB negative blood walks in and goes, I will be teaching you as much as I can to get you up to speed in these next 5 years. And I hope that you can guys both become great heroes so you guys will never come back here or be put in jail, because what happened to you when you're little was way too much for any of you guys to actually handle for being just that small. So I hope I can help you guys get into UA. And he bows and respectfully waves and walks out. And Izumi's like, okay, am I being moved? And he goes, and Aizawa goes, no, you're not being moved. Actually, she is being moved. And he points at Himiko, and Izumi starts hugging her a little tighter. He goes, no. And he goes, yes, she's being moved into here. And Izumi hears that and goes, okay, and loosens her grip a little. And Himiko turns around and hugs Izumi tightly. And Aizawa goes, okay, now that has happened, you are getting 2 pints of blood a day because something happened when you remembered. And she starts to think of what happened, and she starts to tear up, and Himiko feels the tears, and she's like, yeah, no. She hugs Izumi a little tighter, and Izumi hugs back, and she stops tearing up and just falls back asleep. And he goes, well, my job's done here. We skip 5 years. Aizawa comes back, and by this point, Mitsuki and Bakugo have both learnt of what has happened to Izumi and what her deal is and what her quirk is. So they've been trying daily, just vocally trying to get in touch with her. Then one day, after like 2 years of she's 12 and Bakugo's 12, they finally get in contact with Himiko, because Himiko's the one that talks to everybody now. And she goes, oh, Izumi? Yeah, she's currently in class. You want me to leave a message? And they go, yeah, for her to call us back when she's done. She goes, okay, I will do. And so later that day, Izumi calls them back and says, hi, Aunt. And they get back in touch, and after 3 years, it's now the 10-month time skip, and Izumi is finally seeing Bakugo again, and Bakugo's happy about this. So Bakugo runs up and hugs Izumi, and Izumi is slightly hugging Bakugo back. She doesn't remember Bakugo very well, because all she has is glimpses of when she was younger, before 4, nowadays. So she's very hesitant on trusting Bakugo and Mitsuki. But after 3 years of them meeting back and forth, or talking back and forth, she trusts them openly, and she can say that she trusts them enough to see them again. Apparently again for her, but I'm going to leave it there. If you guys like this series, please consider hitting that like button. If you guys want more of my content, hit my little icon, hit my little smiley face at the bottom. And if you guys like my content enough, consider subscribing. And if you guys have subscribed already and you really like my content and want me to continue this, like button. Have any more ideas for me? Comment. I'm looking to collab with other YouTubers. So, if you're another YouTuber, I already have Don't Fecking Judge Me, FECK, on my Discord. So I'll try to put my Discord link in the description, so you guys can get in contact with me easier. And talk to you guys later, hopefully. Bye. See you guys next time.